My name is Fiona Delaney. I'm CEO of Origin Chain Networks. We're an agri-tech company and we're a software development company. And we largely work with mobile and ubiquitous computing to deliver services to farmers and the farming community. We also address issues that are found at the other end, at the retail side of the food value chain, where mobile phones are also commonly used devices for digitizing data and delivering technology services within work practice. So today I'm going to talk about some work that I do with my own company, but also my contributions to standards development in blockchain generally. So I'm an expert member with the National Standards Authority of Ireland. My main focus is on distributed computing, and I contribute largely to the blockchain standards development in Ireland, Europe through Sensenelec, ISO, IEEE, and I'm involved with UNCFACT and UNECHE, which is more focused on trade and interoperability issues. So yeah, it's going to be a quick spin through some of where we are with standards and blockchain and the focus, which is largely on interoperability. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 use cases, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so this is the only thing I will add to John's description of blockchain. Blockchain and distributed ledger technologies are basically a foundational technology for multi-party systems. They're not new. They were, a blockchain was first invented in kind of the 1950s. It came out of mathematics and cryptography, and it's created a permanent, immutable, and shared data structure as a foundational technology for global online networks. Because the trust between parties is shifted to systemic trust, this causes a disintermediation effect. And the sort of attraction of that, or the potential of what that disintermediation might be, led to that plethora of blockchain is a revolution and various different claims about what the technology could deliver. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this here is, so if we see blockchain as a trust infrastructure, there are different approaches that might, sorry, one of my kids is going to school. So there are different approaches that a government or or regional approaches that can be taken. This is from the World Economic Forum report, which was published just this month. So there are blockchain sovereign strategies, there are regulatory sandboxes, and there are government services. So sovereign strategies are what we might see in Europe, through EBSI, through the European Blockchain Partnership, developing strategies that will make this technology available widely throughout the territory. And if we look at regulatory sandboxes, there are different approaches, and they are consortium approaches or partnership approaches between sectors, often like in finance, banking sector. The approach that has often been taken has been to create a kind of sandbox environment where problems and solutions can be iterated within the highly regulated confines of their compliance environment. And then government services, there's a number of different approaches, but some of the ones that I have come across have been the Hyderabad Blockchain District, which was supported by the Telangana government. Telangana is a very large district in India, and they have supported through a partnership model with universities and public sector and encouraging startups to deliver solutions into kind of like public sector reform, I would suggest. And then alternatively, Singapore, another kind of open economy, a little bit like our own, has they built a blockchain lab within the confines of government services, and public sector bodies can then connect with, define issues that they might be having, which are largely digital transformation issues, and where emerging technologies might usefully be deployed, whether it's blockchain or AI or some other aspect of new technologies. Solutions can be iterated. And because it is the government research lab, those solutions are often open sourced and made available, not just in Singapore, but globally. So there's some very interesting work happening there. And a little bit later, we're going to have a look at some proposals from the Catalan government in Spain. Okay, next slide, please. I'm just going to add that all of the links are in these slides, so you can follow the reports and you can follow where we're going. Okay, there's an awful lot of text here, but this is in Europe. This is the foundation of where blockchain lies in the broader picture of ICT and the standardization rolling plan. So these are the approach, the strategic approach in Europe has identified. On the top left here, we can see key enablers and security issues. And these 5G, cloud computing, all of these things are kind of transversal or cross-cutting important areas, key enablers, and they add in security there to bind those two issues together. So secure delivery or access to secure services must come hand in hand. Now, the X's are where largely we would see blockchain and distributed ledger technologies having relevance. So public sector information, open data, big data, it's the kind of open transparency and trust piece that John mentioned earlier. And electronic identification, trust services, including e-signatures. You could also say e-privacy is one of the things that blockchain can affect. So just below that, we have societal challenges, and these are the kind of priority areas that the European Commission has identified for citizens. So e-health, digital skills and e-learning, that kind of digital deficit, or improving access to all sorts of resources through digital technology, and so on. On the top right, we see innovation for the digital single marketplace. And the bottom one there is blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. But I think we can see that blockchain is really considered a foundation for the one above, fintech and regtech. Don't know about preservation of digital cinema, but e-invoicing and e-procurement. These are all strands that blockchain and DLT are already delivering services into in Europe. And then sustainable growth. So we look at environmental impact, very, very important. It hasn't been mentioned, but there is an issue, as there is in AI, and particularly neural networks, and the requirement for massive processing power. We need to, and we need to do this for blockchain as well, is to do a kind of environmental or sustainability assessment. What is the value of the service we're providing with the cost of what it's taking for us to deliver that service? So I'm thinking of for those familiar with blockchain, proof of work, consensus models in the public blockchains are just so wasteful of processing and resources that when you're delivering services, for example, to the farming community who are under constant pressure to rationalize and assess the environmental aspects of their service, how can we deliver that service without doing something similar ourselves? So I have just checked here at the bottom, robotics and autonomous systems. There's, I think there should be 2 animations here. If you could just click twice, that should reveal them. So there we go. Thank you very much. So robotics and autonomous systems, so next steps in terms of standardization and exploring and achieving interoperability will be around semantic and protocol interoperability, but also when we're classifying the services delivered by autonomous systems. So we can see it clearly in robotics. It's very important to understand what type of service is autonomous. Is it a rule engine, or is it some other type of automated or autonomous decision making or decision taking process, it's classified so it can be, first of all, understood within a system, but also de-risked for governance and risk strategy purposes. Similarly, when we're talking about blockchain systems, there are questions raised. Can we classify a smart contract or a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization, which claims to operate autonomously? Are these intelligent agents? And if they are, can they be classified? And that will be, it's kind of a new frontier in these discussions about interoperability, governance strategies, enterprise risk strategies, and that kind of thing. So this very text-heavy slide shows the state of play at the moment, and that autonomous and artificial intelligence discussion is kind of where we're going with some of those conversations. Okay, the next slide, please. Thank you. So, so there's 4 different standards organizations or approaches. The rolling plan is a strategy. So ISO has one definition of what a blockchain is. So distributed ledger with confirmed blocks organized in an append-only sequential chain using cryptographic links. Blockchains are designed to be tamper-resistant and to create final, definitive, immutable ledger records. The ITUT, which is a global organization as well, a type of distributed ledger which is composed of digitally recorded data arranged as a successively growing chain of blocks, cryptographic links, and hardened against tampering and revision. So they are 2 very similar, I would suggest, but slightly different definitions. And neither of them refer to autonomous actions or what collective oversight or collective action, which is, I think, is also part of what blockchains deliver, but no one's worked out how to define it yet. So that's another discussion. The IEEE, whom we all know from electrical standards, on our plugs, all that kind of stuff, they have a number of different blockchain projects, and they tend to be sector specific. And there's one project here, 2418.3, and they're trying to, or attempting to define a standard for the framework of distributed ledger technology for use in agriculture. It's a really, really ambitious project, and they've actually deferred delivery by about 18 months, once or twice already. So it's obviously ongoing, and it's probably getting bigger and bigger. It's a massive scope, but there's opportunities to get involved with that or to observe with that. And also ISO and ITU are open to experts, domain experts, let's say in agriculture, but also technology experts in contributing, getting involved, observing, to understand what is the current state of the art or the current state of play, but also anticipating and starting to define and explore potential for new standards development. And similarly, the European Commission rolling plan, we've already seen some of those objectives, and they have digital innovation and blockchain unit, which might be interesting, particularly for where people are looking for funding and that kind of thing. So it's their multi-stakeholder platform. So we're going back to that idea of multi-party systems and how appropriate that might be in service delivery. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so this is from ISO. I am the co-editor of what's called TR 3242, which is a new technical report on blockchain use cases. We have 22 use cases from across the world. You can see the list of them here. I'm going to take a deeper dive into three of those shortly. Just to look at some of these graphs here, the one on the bottom left, more than 50% use a private blockchain implementation. The rest are either public or hybrid. And hybrid, each of the two of the systems we're going to look at are hybrid solutions where they offer both a private and a public aspect to the service that they're delivering. Over on the right, the pie chart there, you can see all the names of the different services that are used and whether they were public or private or hybrid instances. And then the graph in the middle is a spread of the economic activity sections that were described, and the majority are in kind of IT services. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Guillaume, it says here that I can control your screen, but I'm too scared to in case it doesn't work. So thank you very much for spinning through these slides for me. Okay, this one here. In Holland, I think I mentioned previously, in the Netherlands, they have they took a sovereign approach to delivering services and exploring and providing infrastructure. And in tandem with that, they had this regulatory sandbox approach. So here we have a use case described by a company called LTO. And that was it's a small part of a larger outsourcing company. So it's a software outsourcing company building software solutions for enterprise, public sector, all that kind of thing. So here they used that sandbox environment to scope and define international waste transportation management system using blockchain between the Netherlands and Belgium. So the two governments were involved, and this is a UML behavioral diagram, and we can see here on the left-hand side who the actors are. So there's the licensed disposal operator, the licensed inspection company. On the right, we have the two governments, and then we have the service provider noted here as well. And you can see the purposes for which each of the actors is using the system. I'm going to move to the next slide, please, where we have a system view architecture. And the architecture description is defined by ISO. So this is the ISO reference architecture. And you can see how it is atomized from the point of view of nodes in the blockchain system. So if we look at the kind of greenish one here in the middle, that is a private permissioned, what they call workflow engine, operated by the service provider, which is LTO network. And all of the actors, the roadside inspection authorities, the truck driver, and then oversight dashboards provided for Belgian and Dutch governments or ministries, along with the licensed waste disposal and inspection companies, are all connected to that private workflow engine. On the left, you can see in the blue that there's inputs from non-DLT system. So they have it defined there that will be the automated data input from the weighbridge sensors. So sometimes in blockchain terms, we describe that as an oracle or an external source of truth, which is important for triggering next steps in a process. So we can, if there's a discrepancy between the anticipated weight at the weighbridge and, and what the truck arrives with, basically, we can say that an anomaly is triggered and compliance is questioned or queried, and an inspection would ensue. And then the piece on the right is the on-chain public network. And this is where how would I say this? So the information derived from the private workflow engine, when aspects of the process are completed and sort of achieved, they are encapsulated, and that notice, not just of the transaction or what happened when, but the fact that it was either fully compliant or that a question was raised, can be written permanently to the public blockchain and can be seen for full transparency. Let's put it that way. So this, I decided to show this one because we can see this is it's already operating for over 18 months or 2 years now. They've, as far as I know, they have added another country. So they are already tracking and tracing the continental transportation of waste. And that is operating now and is operating very well. So we can see, you know, in all these discussions, I don't want to say the Brexit word, but I'm going to say the Brexit word, that idea of cross-border compliance and facilitation of international trade and meeting those requirements is kind of interesting. It gives an interesting insight into how that might happen and what data and how that might flow through a distributed ledger system is kind of described here. Okay, so the next use case I'm going to look at is, thank you very much, Guillaume, is self-management. It's a very cumbersome title, self-management of renewable energy prosumer microgrids. This use case was published both in the ITUT use case study, which was made available 2019 in July, and was updated and included in the ISO repository with additional elements. So in fact, what I love about this is that it doesn't just manage the prosumer microgrid aspect of co-creating renewable energy. It also extends that purpose into other actions that the consumers or citizens can take and can reward those. So even if you don't participate in a renewable energy microgrid, you can, as a citizen, potentially and hypothetically, because the system is not in full operation, you can, or you would be able to, gain credits for climate positive consumer actions. So we could say that if you bought an electric car, and that vendor is registered in the system, that you would gain energy coins for taking that positive action. And that can extend right the way through the system, so that if you have a bike and you get your bike serviced, the payment on that, you can kind of discount it with this idea of energy coins. And this whole system is described by the Catalan government, and it's something that they're looking into to operate an incentive, like a region-wide climate positive incentive scheme for their citizenry. And the energy coins at the end of the year can be traded against your local taxes. So they have no other purpose. They can't be exited from the system in any other way. So it's a way of incentivizing and rewarding positive consumer action, and then trading it off against local taxes. And we can see here on the left, there's the prosumer, there's the citizen user, and there's the service provider through the Catalan government. On the right-hand side, we have local businesses who are registering carbon-friendly products and services, and City Hall, who's onboarding local users, the public sector, service providers, taxpayers, that kind of thing. So I hope that's clear. It's clear to me, but I'm very familiar with it. Can we see the next slide, please? This is their data flow, which we can see is a little bit different. They don't have two blockchain systems interacting. Down in the bottom hand corner, there is no other DLT system. Their non-DLT systems are automated data input from Prosumer smart meters. So again, we have this autonomous input, a kind of oracle from the amount of energy, prosumer microgrid energy created and used. And then they have everything else that is on chain are the admin systems, the user systems. User systems are mobile. Prosumers earn coins for shared energy. Citizens earn coins for sustainable purchases. Businesses can register the purchase of eligible sustainable products, and one would assume that there is some kind of energy coin aspect or incentive to that as well. This implementation is built on a private fork of Ethereum. They chose Ethereum to iterate the MVP because of the smart contract functionality. It really is still one of the most finessed systems for writing smart contracts. Okay, moving on to the next one. This is my own company's one, and this hopefully the slides get a little bit easier to read. So this is an overview of what blockchain and distributed ledger systems can offer agri-food and basically any other enterprise. We're talking about enhanced communication, enhanced cooperation, and this idea in multi-party systems of co-creation of the data sets or the data that's available in the system. And then there's this element of decision-making or action-taking. So we can talk about real-time data availability, facilitating flag raising or automated or autonomous responses. It's being interoperable with IoT and AI analysis. So this decision-making, action-taking area is where it comes into the realm of autonomous action. Is it an artificial agent, or is there some other element that is the artificial agent and this is just deploying it? So those are the kind of questions that are happening. And then any kind of bonus feature, this all has to be seen as part of digital transformation. It's about rationalizing systems and solving the governance puzzle in multi-party systems. And blockchain has a lot to offer in that environment. Okay, the next slide, please. So you guys know probably way more about this than I do, but this is a simple overview of the kind of compliance environment that we're talking about for farming. There's the Board BA accreditation schemes, there's the licensing through the Department of Agriculture, there's additional kind of consumer categories, I think we can call them, like organic farming, which is also separately and independently audited. Then there's the advent of Origin Green, which has another kind of accreditation scheme, which looks at the UN SDGs as a kind of a criteria. And all of this is really useful. This is the overview through in which we move forward into the next level of service deliveries, which is really going to be about balancing the commercial and environmental and sustainability objectives. Sustainability can mean many things. Sustainability can be commercial sustainability. So we're talking about finding the balance between those commercial objectives and environmental objectives that are required moving forward in the context of Europe and its ambitions to be climate neutral in the future. Okay, next slide, please. So this is my own company. This is a blockchain use case that we've described. The brand name kind of thing is Agri Trust, and we are looking to provide a future of food we trust. The more generic use case name is Universal Farm Compliance. Next slide, please. So the problem that we've identified in the whole farm to fork transparency conversation is that there is a big gap in those kind of systems from on-farm data. And from many different perspectives, that origin story of food is very, very important. When we think about it in carbon equivalent, the 80% of the carbon footprint of food is on farm. and it's 20% thereafter. So that whole provenance, if we're looking at to strike that balance, 80% of that story is accrued over the lifetime, particularly of a cow or something like that, you know. Okay, next slide, please. So the solution that we are hoping to provide is co-creation of the digital provenance of food. I've used some data here about carbon footprints, but it really could be any element. As John was talking about earlier on, you're talking about tracking the use of antibiotics in the lifetime of an animal on the farm. You know, there's a whole range of processes that could be defined and tracked and given transparency into. But as always, what we're trying to do is strike that balance between those commercial, required, licensed, compliant objectives and some of those newer environmental imperatives that need to be balanced. So we think the problem is really around data digitization. Farmers have this information in their lives, in their head, on their farm, and there isn't a ubiquitous, generalized way of reporting this biodiversity information, for example, simply and alongside those other farming practices that they must also report. Okay, next slide, please. So in digging into the problem space, problems for farmers are connectivity, poor tech adoption. They have concerns about their reputation. If they're giving this information on a real-time basis, what if they made a mistake? What if they got something wrong? What if they said something, reported it, and it became a problem later? And they also have concerns about data ownership. Similarly, field workers, environmental field workers would also like to have a toolkit for data digitization in the field, and we noted some of those. Compliance bodies, digital systems are in place. There's a question about whether or not farmers are reliable sources. Can they self-report? That kind of thing. There's internal and external resistance to change, and there's pressure applied to innovate. And it feels like, or perhaps feels like it's not coming from within or from their own concerns. Additionally, we had a look at, like I mentioned before, retail and hospitality. And there's some common issues there that kind of define really what the difficulties are. How do we trust and assure the data? There's a challenge around the circular economy, and that tracking of end-of-life waste management is really difficult to report, given the highly distributed nature of where the losses occur. Next slide, please. So this is the use case diagram. We use blockchain in two parts of the system. The first part is to manage the digital identities of the farmers and the farm assistants or farm operatives on the farm, to create a reputation system for who the data collectors are. And that becomes their own reputation and their own reusable, repurposable. Often farm assistants can work on one farm and then maybe another farm where they may, track across Europe collecting oranges or whatever. So there's a bunch of different issues there that can be addressed using the SSI self-sovereign identity model of data ownership. So let's go to the next slide. I'm just conscious of the time here and I don't want to not get to the end. So our value proposition that AgriTrust is used by farmers and field workers. AgriTrust mobile farming certifies carbon KPIs, habitat quality and food provenance to enable food value chain for all. That's simple and ambitious. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, here we see the system view architecture. We can see there's two different blockchain systems in use. The first is down on the bottom. That's how we create the know your customer kind of information, and we use self-sovereign identity and privacy by design mechanisms to create that. We use Hyperledger Indy to do that. On the right-hand side, then we have, we describe this as using the EBSI node, which is provided through the European Union, European Blockchain Partnership. We don't actually run an EBSI node here in Ireland, so this is a hypothetical system. We don't need an EBSI node to run our system. We can build it anyway. But if what we want to do is achieve this compliance infrastructure or reimagine that interface between farmers and compliance bodies, it makes sense to describe or to anticipate or to desire to use these, to deploy this sandbox approach provided through the European Commission. Okay, next step, please. This is who we are. We are 2 co-founders and we have 3 people working with us, doing various different tasks. Saad Shahid and myself, we recently won 2 awards for innovation and standards development. One, very proud to receive a national award from NSAI, and the second is the European Standards and Innovation Award from Senelec. And that is for our, I would say, our innovation and application of blockchain solutions within that regulatory framework that exists within Europe. Okay, the next slide, please. I think we're just there. So yeah, don't forget, agri-trust, mobile farming, addressing digitization needs of farmers on the farm, looking to certify carbon KPIs, habitat quality and food provenance, so we can enable food value chain transparency for all. Thank you. Thank you, Guillaume. Oh, sources and resources. So these are very, very recent. I would just say the 4th point down, blockchain deployment toolkit, that is from 2020, and that is from a trade perspective. That again is free resources and stepwise, how to define your use case within that kind of global trade context. That's really useful, and it's probably if you're not technical, if you're a decision maker in a business kind of environment, that would make good companion reading with some of the resources John mentioned earlier. Thank you so much, and thank you, Guillaume, for helping me out there.
Hi, Fiona. Trevor Classy here.
Hi, Trevor.
Great, fantastic presentation. I love the tech aspects of it. I see so many presentations with theory, but the tech and the practical implementations are fantastic. I just wonder, with regards, it's such a fantastic product and service. What's the buy-in have you found here in Ireland? Or how, or has there been buy-in, or how is it really challenging to explain the technicalities of the blockchain in the industry that you're pitched in?
Great question, really great question, because when I talk to farmers, which obviously has been difficult because nobody ever said the best way to get in touch with farmers is through Zoom or even on Twitter. But when we talk to people, at that primary food production side, you have really very little time to kind of, I'm a tech company. Oh, really? What's that got to do with me? No, we deliver services with mobile phones because we believe mobile is the way for farmers. Everyone, 85%. According to there's a kind of SkillsNet adoption survey that for on-farm technology usage, more than 85% of farmers have a smartphone. Only 50%, or approximately, you can say this is a good thing or a bad thing. 50% of farmers say they are comfortable with using technology. When it was dig deeper into that, of 10 kind of types of technology services that were listed, only 2 services had more than 1/3 of the participants going, oh yeah, I know what that is. One of them was the calf registration system. And the other one was, when the tractor beeps reversing. So okay, wow. Those are the only 2 things. So this was that survey, I think, is really revealing and was very honest. So from a technologist point of view, I'm like, oh no, it's so much worse than I thought. But actually, it's also so much better. They are crying out for something that makes their life simple in a realistic way. I'm not saying your mobile phone is going to milk a cow for you, but in terms of you making easy reporting, and if you can report on things like water quality, stream management, drainage management, hedgerow management, wildlife surveys. You don't have to do everything, but if we can crowdsource some of those things in a way that makes the information ubiquitous enough to raise flags or to acknowledge gains, that becomes really important for the government and public sector, and can, you know, I don't think it's too ambitious to say that we can help to quantify and measure what we are doing in a way that creates gains for us in terms of the conversation we're having about sustainable agriculture at Europe level. So what we don't have is broad-based nationwide data sets. This is a way that we can start to improve that situation and to give farmers the toolkit, like a little penknife, only it's in their phone, that can help them digitize their data on the farm, helping them achieve simpler reporting workflows. But the opportunity on the compliance side, on the public sector side, for having a channel to something like real-time and ubiquitous data is phenomenal. You know, when we think, sorry, Sarah, go on.
Thanks, Fiona. And I was just wondering, the incentivization for the farmer to give up that valuable data. So we hear a lot of blockchains, you know, the idea of tokenization and gamification.
Yeah.
So is that a core element to actually for them to give up that valuable data?
Nobody on a farm ever told me that they wanted to use cryptocurrency as the incentive for collecting this data. And surprisingly, there are farmers who are crypto owners, right? But they're not interested because it's compliance related. They're interested because they like a flutter, basically, I think. So I don't talk about cryptocurrency as an incentivization mechanism. And when we think about that Catalan use case, where they are using a cryptocurrency or a crypto token, that energy coin, it's tradable against your taxes. And that's why it has value. Because if it just itself was this token, that's honestly, I think we've seen from the crypto markets, it's not stable enough, and it doesn't have enough relevance in real world systems to act as that incentivization scheme. I think for us, that is a next level in terms of rewards, possibly incentivization. But if we're looking at other trust mechanisms and other means of delivering value throughout the system, and particularly back to the farmer, with protecting that idea of data ownership. And if that information, that data that they're providing is used usefully, either, let's say, to achieve a reduction in fines or to mitigate fines, or value can be placed on that, and participation in that kind of scheme is valuable and can be quantified, and that value in part anyway can accrue back to them. It's in development. It's the best way that I can say it. But, you know, really exploring what the value is and the value proposition, you know, side by side, that's balancing of those commercial objectives with environmental objectives, and looking at the carbon equivalent of that side of the value chain is something that it needs to be worked on.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Fiona.
Thanks, Trevor. There's a couple of questions in the chat there. Michelle, I'll let you pick one.
I think is, if I can just pick one in the interest of time, and then we'll move on. So on a day-to-day basis, how much extra workload is involved for the farmer, and will this replace existing record keeping and reporting for farmers?
Realistically, I don't think a mobile service can replace anything. Can't replace anything, but it can supplement it, and it can create this new channel and new pathway to real-time and ubiquitous information. So firstly, I don't think it can replace enterprise systems, and that's why we're focusing on certifying or creating discovery around new data flows that are not already measured. You know, we need to swiftly in order to respond to some of those regulatory imperatives through the Farm to Fork strategy. We're looking at how to get baseline information, onboard it and make it available purposefully for, and this is our way of doing it. And we need to address that and acknowledge that as a co-creation between the farmers and anybody else who needs to use that information. Then in terms of what the farmer is doing, when you think about team management, you've got your farm manager, let's say, and the team, they're already using mobile phones, to communicate. English is not always the first language. And there's a whole bunch of other interface things there that we can help resolve by addressing them head on and delivering sort of targeted services, really easy to use in a way, just like a penknife. It sort of sticks in your pocket, but it does a bunch of stuff, 1,000 things, That's the way that we're looking at this, that we can, a farmer doesn't need to use all aspects of it. A farmer can just use it to help manage team workflow, or if they're going to start reporting on hedgerow management in a more ongoing basis, sort of real-time basis, can be images, mapping, tree surveys, that kind of thing. And that's all they do with it. They don't have to do something else, but there's an opt-in element, and then they're getting that compliance certification of achievement through time of good data integrity and good insight into the provenance of not just the food or the product they're supplying to the food chain, but the environment that they're managing as that product is created.